Imagine being surrounded by some of the most physically attractive people you have ever seen in your life. The chemistry is electric, the attraction is overwhelming, and then someone tells you, you cannot kiss, you cannot touch, you cannot be physically intimate in any way. Every time you break the rules, your entire group loses money, real money, thousands of dollars gone because you could not resist. Sounds like psychological torture, right? But here is the fascinating part. Something unexpected keeps happening to these people. The more they are forced to connect without physical intimacy, the deeper and more genuine their connections become. And the people who came in looking for a good time keep leaving having experienced something that feels surprisingly close to real love. Why? What is actually happening psychologically when physical desire is deliberately restricted? Today we find out. Welcome to Psychology of Love, where we decode the science behind attraction, relationships, and human connection. Today we are breaking down the fascinating psychology behind one of Netflix's most popular and most psychologically rich reality shows, Too Hot to Handle. On the surface, it looks like a show about attractive people struggling not to hook up. But underneath that surface is a genuinely sophisticated psychological experiment about self-control, desire, emotional depth, and what happens to human connection when physical intimacy is deliberately removed from the equation. By the end of this video, you are going to understand attraction, self-control, and human connection in a way the show itself never fully explains. Let's dive in. Let's start with the most fundamental psychological question the show raises. Why does restricting something make us want it more? This is one of the most well-documented phenomena in all of social psychology, and it has a name: psychological reactance. Psychologist Jack Brem first described psychological reactance in 1966. His theory states that whenever a person perceives their freedom to have or do something is being restricted or threatened, their desire for that thing increases significantly. This is why telling a child they cannot have a toy makes them want it desperately. It is why forbidden relationships feel so intoxicating. And it is exactly why the Too Hot to Handle participants find themselves more consumed by physical desire than they ever would have been in a normal dating environment. The restriction itself becomes the fuel. But here is where it gets really psychologically interesting. Reactance does not just increase desire for the restricted thing. Research shows it also redirects attention and energy toward alternative outlets. When physical intimacy is removed as an option, the participant's psychological energy does not disappear. It redirects into conversation, into emotional vulnerability, into genuine curiosity about the person in front of them. And this redirection, completely unintentional on the participant's part, begins producing something none of them came to the show expecting: genuine emotional connection. Psychologist Roy Baumeister, one of the world's leading researchers on self-control, found that the deliberate restraint of immediate impulses consistently produces deeper engagement with long-term goals and values. In the context of Too Hot to Handle, the immediate impulse is physical. The long-term goal, whether participants consciously recognize it or not, is genuine connection. The show's rules are essentially forcing participants to choose the long-term goal by making the immediate impulse unavailable. Now let's look at what is happening inside the brain during this process, because the neuroscience is genuinely fascinating. Human attraction and desire are primarily driven by the limbic system, the brain's ancient emotional and reward processing center. When we encounter someone physically attractive, the limbic system activates rapidly and powerfully. Dopamine floods the reward circuits, testosterone and estrogen surge, the body prepares for physical connection. This limbic response is fast, powerful, and largely unconscious. It is essentially your brain's oldest software, running at full speed. Self-control, the ability to resist this immediate impulse, is managed by an entirely different brain region. The prefrontal cortex, the most evolutionarily recent part of the human brain, is responsible for long-term thinking, impulse regulation, and value-based decision-making. When Too Hot to Handle participants exercise self-control, choosing not to break the rules despite overwhelming physical desire, they are essentially forcing their prefrontal cortex to override their limbic system. And here is what makes this neurologically significant. Research by neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman at UCLA found that when the prefrontal cortex successfully overrides limbic impulses, it does not just suppress the desire, It redirects the associated neural energy towards social cognition, the mental processes involved in understanding other people. In simple terms, restraining physical desire neurologically enhances the capacity for emotional and psychological connection. The brain cannot fully pursue both simultaneously, and when physical pursuit is blocked, emotional pursuit deepens automatically. Here is something that most people find genuinely surprising, and that Too Hot to Handle illustrates better than almost any other cultural phenomenon. Moving too quickly into physical intimacy can actually prevent genuine emotional connection from forming. This seems counterintuitive. Surely physical intimacy brings people closer together? And the answer is yes and no, and the distinction is critically important. Physical intimacy absolutely produces bonding, primarily through the release of oxytocin during touch and physical closeness. But this oxytocin bonding creates what psychologists call premature attachment, a feeling of emotional closeness that is actually driven by neurochemistry rather than genuine psychological compatibility. Research by psychologist Susan Sprecher at Illinois State University found that couples who moved into physical intimacy very quickly in their relationship consistently reported lower long-term relationship satisfaction than couples who allowed emotional intimacy to develop first, even when initial attraction levels were identical. The reason is straightforward. When physical intimacy comes first, it generates powerful feelings of attachment that can make two people feel deeply connected before they have actually established whether they are genuinely compatible. They are essentially bonded by chemistry before they know whether they actually like each other. Too Hot to Handle removes this dynamic entirely. By blocking physical intimacy, it forces participants to actually get to know each other before the neurochemical bonding of physical touch creates an artificial sense of connection. The result, as the show repeatedly demonstrates, is that genuine compatibility becomes visible much more clearly. The people who truly connect emotionally without physical intimacy are far more likely to have something real. And the people who have nothing to say to each other without physical escalation discover that truth quickly and clearly. Now let's talk about one of the most psychologically clever elements of Too Hot to Handle, the money penalty. Every time a participant breaks the rules, the group loses a portion of the significant cash prize. This creates a fascinating multi-layered psychological dynamic that goes far beyond simple game show mechanics. Layer 1: Social accountability. Research on behavior change consistently shows that social accountability is one of the most powerful motivators of behavioral restraint. When your choices affect other people, not just yourself, the psychological cost of giving into impulse increases dramatically. The money penalty transforms self-control from a purely personal challenge into a social contract. Breaking the rules is no longer just about your own desire. It is about taking money from people who trusted you to exercise restraint. This social dimension activates entirely different psychological mechanisms than purely personal self-discipline. Layer 2: The sunk cost of restraint. Every hour participants successfully restrain themselves, they are investing in the potential prize. And psychological research on commitment and consistency, most famously documented by Robert Cialdini, shows that the more we invest in a course of action, the more psychologically committed we become to continuing it. Participants who have successfully restrained themselves for days or weeks have a powerful psychological investment in continuing that restraint, making each subsequent temptation slightly easier to resist than the last. Layer 3: Shared sacrifice and bonding. Perhaps most fascinatingly, research on group bonding consistently shows that shared sacrifice and shared challenge are among the most powerful generators of genuine group cohesion and individual bonding. When participants collectively resist temptation, or when one person's lapse costs the whole group, it creates shared emotional experiences that generate real bonds between people who might otherwise remain superficial acquaintances. The money penalty is not just a game mechanic. It is an accidentally brilliant social psychology experiment in shared sacrifice and collective accountability, one of the most consistent and most psychologically fascinating patterns across multiple seasons of Too Hot to Handle is the genuine transformation that many participants undergo. People who arrive presenting themselves as commitment-phobic, emotionally unavailable, or interested only in physical connection often leave having experienced something that genuinely shifts their psychological relationship with intimacy and vulnerability. Why does this happen? Psychologists who study behavior change identify a concept called behavioral activation of values. This theory suggests that when we are consistently required to behave in accordance with values we do not consciously hold, we gradually begin to internalize those values as genuinely our own. Participants who came to Too Hot to Handle valuing only physical connection, but who are then required for weeks to practice emotional vulnerability, honest communication, and delayed gratification, often find that these practices begin to feel genuinely rewarding rather than just obligatory. The brain's reward system is remarkably adaptive. Behaviors that initially feel like deprivation, if practiced consistently enough, begin generating their own neurological rewards. Emotional connection starts producing dopamine where only physical connection did before. This is the psychological mechanism behind the genuine transformations the show produces. It is also, interestingly, the same mechanism behind many successful therapeutic interventions for avoidant attachment. By consistently practicing vulnerability and emotional connection in a safe environment, even when it initially feels deeply uncomfortable, people with avoidant patterns can genuinely rewire their relationship with intimacy over time. Too Hot to Handle is accidentally doing attachment therapy on national television. So what does Too Hot to Handle ultimately teach us about the real psychology of attraction and love? Lesson 1. Physical attraction is the beginning of the story, not the whole story. The show repeatedly demonstrates that the most physically attractive people in any room are not necessarily the most emotionally fulfilling partners. Physical attraction gets your attention. Emotional connection keeps it. Lesson 2. Restraint deepens desire. Psychological reactance and the neuroscience of redirected desire both confirm what Too Hot to Handle demonstrates visually. Slowing down physical intimacy does not diminish attraction. In most cases, it intensifies and deepens it significantly. Lesson 3. Self-control is one of the most attractive qualities a human being can possess. Research by psychologist June Tangmi at George Mason University found that high self-control is one of the strongest predictors of positive relationship outcomes, including relationship satisfaction, conflict resolution, and long-term commitment. The participants on Too Hot to Handle who exercise genuine self-control consistently become more attractive, not less, to their partners. Lesson 4. Emotional vulnerability is not weakness, it is the gateway to real connection. Every genuine connection formed on the show happens through moments of honest emotional vulnerability, not through physical escalation. This mirrors what relationship research consistently finds in the real world. Lesson 5. You already know this, but you need reminding. Most people intellectually understand that emotional connection matters more than physical attraction in the long run. The challenge is that our neurobiology is wired for immediate physical response, and our culture constantly reinforces the primacy of physical attraction. Too Hot to Handle, for all its entertainment value, is essentially a weekly reminder of something we already know but consistently forget. The connections worth having take longer to build, and the things worth having are almost always worth waiting for. Too Hot to Handle looks like a show about attractive people failing to keep their hands to themselves. But underneath that entertainment is a genuinely profound psychological truth. The deepest connections, the ones that actually last, are never built on physical attraction alone. They are built in the conversations that happen when the physical is temporarily set aside, in the vulnerabilities shared when there is nothing else to hide behind, in the genuine curiosity about another person that emerges when desire has nowhere immediate to go. Restraint is not deprivation. Sometimes it is the very thing that makes real connection possible. If this video gave you something valuable, please subscribe to Psychology of Love, because every week we bring you the real science behind human connection and relationships. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think moving slowly physically leads to stronger emotional connections? I genuinely want to hear your experience.